The parking garage was dim, the kind of place where every sound echoes like a secret. I balanced my shopping bags, already dreaming of kicking off my shoes at home, when something caught my eye. Just 2 rows away sat a car I knew better than my own reflection. Mark's silver sedan. My stomach dropped. He was supposed to be at work, buried in endless meetings. What in the world was his car doing here? I froze, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I wasn't imagining it. I knew that license plate, that tiny dent near the back door, even the foggy tint on the headlights. My hands tightened around the shopping bags until the plastic handles dug into my skin. I crept closer, half hoping I was wrong, but every step whispered the truth I didn't want to face. And then, the driver's door opened. Mark stepped out, tugging at his tie like nothing was out of place, like he had every reason to be there. But before I could even process, the passenger door cracked open, and out came a woman. She laughed, light, carefree, intimate, as she fixed her hair. That sound sliced through me like glass. My fingers curled around my car keys until my knuckles burned, rage boiling inside me. But I swallowed it down. Not here. Not yet. I stepped forward, the sharp click of my heels echoing against the concrete. Mark's head whipped around, his eyes widening like a deer caught in headlights. The woman beside him froze, then smirked, as if daring me to make a scene. My voice came out steady, colder than I even intended. "Mark, what the hell is this? Who is she?" The words sliced the air, and for a moment, even the garage seemed to fall silent. He stammered, his face paling as sweat formed at his temple. "Laura, it's not what it looks like. I was just giving her a ride." His voice cracked halfway through, a flimsy excuse collapsing under its own weight. A ride? In the middle of the day? In a parking garage? My chest burned with a fury I struggled to keep from exploding. I wanted to scream, to claw at the betrayal spilling right in front of me. The woman tilted her head, lips curling into a smug grin. "A ride, huh? We weren't exactly just driving." Her words dripped with venom, meant to wound, and oh, they did. My heart thudded in my ears, my knees trembling, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of watching me break. I stood taller, my nails digging into my palms as I locked eyes with Mark. I could feel the storm building inside me, but I wasn't about to unleash it here, not yet. My world tilted, like the ground beneath me had been yanked away. Every laugh we'd shared, every late night he claimed was overtime, suddenly felt like poisoned memories. But instead of screaming, I forced my face into calm. Rage simmered under my skin. Yes, but I wasn't about to lose control in front of this woman. I swallowed the fire, knowing it would taste sweeter when I finally let it out on my terms. Mark reached toward me, his hand shaking, but I pulled back before he could touch me. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. His mouth opened, then closed, his excuses choking in his throat. The woman shifted uncomfortably, though that smirk still clung to her lips like cheap perfume. Inside, my chest ached with betrayal, but alongside it was something stronger, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Right there, in that dim garage, I made myself a silent vow. He thought he could make me look like a fool, thought I'd yell and cry and walk away broken, but I wouldn't give him that power. No, I'd make him regret underestimating me. I turned toward my car, my grip firm on the keys, already planning the game he didn't even know he was about to play. And that night, when the house felt too quiet, I knew my mask would be my weapon. That evening, the house felt like a stage where I had to play the part of the loyal wife. I set the table, stirred the sauce on the stove, and forced my lips into a smile every time Mark walked past me. The smell of garlic and onions filled the kitchen, but underneath it, all I could taste was bitterness. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was racing, weaving strategy with every chop of the knife. He strolled in, loosening his tie like nothing had happened in that parking garage. "Smells good," he said, trying too hard, his voice just a little too light. I glanced at him, studying every twitch of his jaw, every flicker of guilt in his eyes. He thought he was fooling me, thought his lies were still airtight. I poured the wine, steady and graceful, hiding the storm that brewed inside me. As we sat down, I leaned casually against my chair, the picture of calm. "So?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "How was your busy day?" He let out a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You know, long meetings, traffic, nothing special." I nodded, letting him believe, letting him think I was swallowing it whole. But behind my calm face, I was already sharpening the knife, not the one on the table, but the one I'd used to slice through his perfect little web of lies. I watched him eat, every bite of pasta disappearing into the mouth that had just kissed another woman. My fork scraped against the plate, and the sound felt like a scream only I could hear. He kept talking about nothing. Work drama, a new project, the same boring details he always used to fill the silence. I nodded at the right moments, smiled when I had to, but inside, my thoughts twisted like a blade. Part of me wanted to slam the glass against the table, to shout the truth I had seen with my own eyes. But another part, the stronger part, whispered patience. He didn't deserve an outburst. He deserved precision. And if there was one thing I had learned in all our years together, it was how to wait. I let my eyes linger on him a little longer than usual, studying him like a criminal I was building a case against. When he caught me staring, he gave me a nervous grin. "What?" he asked, chuckling as if everything was normal. I tilted my head, my smile soft, controlled. "Nothing," I said smoothly, sipping my wine. But inside, I was already plotting the beginning of his end. Tonight wasn't about confronting him. Tonight was about setting the stage, letting him think he was safe, while I quietly prepared the trap he'd never see coming. I cleared the dishes with deliberate, slow movements, letting the clink of plates be the metronome for the plan forming in my head. Every small domestic motion felt like theater, perfunctory, safe, designed to make him lower his guard. As I rinsed a plate, I replayed the footage in my mind. The woman's laugh, Mark's guilty smile, the way they leaned into each other like it was nothing. My hands didn't tremble. My resolve did. When the kitchen was quiet and the city outside hushed, I retreated to the office and opened my laptop. I typed in a search for the mall's security number, pretending curiosity to anyone who might overhear, but inside I was already 3 steps ahead. I pictured timestamps, clear shots, the kind of proof that doesn't beg for belief. It demands it. I made a mental checklist, footage, screenshots, timestamps, witness, and felt that satisfying coldness of control. Before I went to bed, I stood in the hallway and watched him from the doorway as he read the paper, pretending to be tired. He glanced up once, met my gaze, then looked away, guilt like a shadow he couldn't shake. I smiled, small and unreadable, and let him believe I was still the woman who forgave too easily. In truth, I was already weaving a web he wouldn't escape. Tomorrow I would start pulling on the threads. The next morning, while Mark snored beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. His phone sat charging on the nightstand, glowing faintly like a secret begging to be unlocked. My pulse quickened as I reached for it, careful not to stir him. His face twitched in sleep, but he didn't move. My fingers swiped, his password as familiar to me as my own reflection. And there it was, a string of messages that made my chest tighten like a vice. Scrolling, I read her words, playful, intimate, dripping with the kind of arrogance only someone sure of their place could have. Last night was worth every risk. When can we sneak away again? Each line was a dagger, but I forced myself to keep reading, to let the pain etch itself into focus. I wasn't collecting heartbreak, I was collecting ammunition, and Mark, in his foolishness, had left the door wide open. I snapped screenshots, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. Then I set the phone back exactly where it had been, not a pixel out of place. I slipped under the covers, my breathing even, while beside me, he slept peacefully, blissfully unaware that his world was already crumbling. I stared at the ceiling again, but this time, I wasn't hollow. I was armed, and it was only the beginning. Later that day, while Mark droned on about errands he'd have to run, I tracked his car on the location app he never thought I paid attention to. The little blue dot moved across the city, not toward the office, but back toward the mall. My stomach twisted, but instead of breaking, I smiled. Let him think he was clever. Let him think I was blind. I was 2 steps behind him only so I could leap 5 steps ahead. By the afternoon, I had made a call, one I never thought I'd make. A friend of mine worked in mall security, and all it took was a quiet coffee and the right tone of voice. "I just need a little help," I said softly, my eyes steady. "Footage from the parking lot, time-stamped. Please." She hesitated, but only for a second. The truth is, women recognize the pain in each other's eyes. She nodded, and within hours, I had the proof in my inbox. When I clicked play, the video made my chest tighten all over again. There he was, stepping out of the car, and there she was, brushing her hair back, laughing like she owned him. They weren't just colleagues, not just friends. The way he leaned in, the way his hand brushed her arm, it screamed of betrayal. I paused the screen, the image frozen like a scar, and instead of crying, I whispered to myself, "You thought you were clever, Mark, but you forgot I'm smarter." I spent the evening turning evidence into weapons, screenshots neatly organized, video clips saved on multiple drives, even timestamps cross-checked with his own text messages, each piece fit together like a puzzle, painting a picture too sharp to deny. And with every file I tucked into my folder, the rage in my chest settled into something colder: resolve. This wasn't about catching him anymore. It was about ending the performance once and for all. At one point, I caught my reflection in the darkened laptop screen. My face looked different. Not broken, not weak, but carved by determination. I thought back to the younger version of me who had once believed Mark's promises, who had trusted blindly. That woman was gone. What stared back at me was someone harder, someone who had been burned but refused to be reduced to ashes. When Mark finally walked through the door that night, whistling like nothing had changed, I greeted him with a smile so soft it could have fooled anyone. I placed a kiss on his cheek, poured him a drink, and asked about his long day. He talked, and I listened, nodding gently while the folder on my laptop glowed like a loaded gun. He had no idea I was already preparing his downfall, and I was going to choose the perfect moment to pull the trigger. I spent all week rehearsing a smile in the mirror and rehearsing the order of events in my head, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I wanted precision. The guest list was small: his mother, his sister, 2 old friends, and a couple who'd known us for years. I purchased flowers that matched the tablecloth, arranged the plates just so, and brewed coffee that smelled like normal life. Everything smelled ordinary. Everything felt deliberate. When guests began to arrive, I greeted them like the hostess I'd always been: warm, composed, effortless. Mark hovered nearby, trying to charm his relatives with casual anecdotes, unaware that each laugh he took was being counted, stored, and cataloged in my mind. His family greeted me with polite smiles, a few exchanged glances that made me think this night might sting more than I'd planned. I poured more wine, letting conversation flow, steering it towards safe, mundane topics, while the evidence sat quietly ready on the living room screen. At the perfect moment, after dessert, when everyone was relaxed and the chatter had softened, I stood, clinking my glass lightly to gather attention. The room quieted out of courtesy, faces turned toward me. I felt no tremor in my hands. Calm felt good on me, like armor. "There's something I need to share with you all," I said, and the sound of my voice in that hush felt like the first clear strike of a bell. I walked over to the TV, remote in hand, my heels tapping against the floor like a drumbeat. Mark's smile faltered, his fork clinking against the plate as he realized something was off. The screen lit up, and the familiar, grainy footage filled the room. Gasps rippled through the table as they watched him step out of his car, then the woman following right after, her laughter sharp enough to echo even through the poor audio. I didn't need to narrate. The images spoke louder than any accusation could. Mark's face turned red, his hand shooting up as if he could block the screen with sheer will. "Laura!" he hissed, his voice cracking. "How could you do this in front of everyone?" His eyes darted between his family, panic seeping into every line of his face. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, cornered and desperate, and for once, I didn't feel pity. I felt power. I set the remote down, folded my hands calmly in front of me, and met his eyes without flinching. How could I? My voice was steady, almost too soft. No, Mark. How could you do this to me? To us? In a parking lot, like some cheap thrill? The silence that followed was deafening. His mother covered her mouth with her hand, his sister stared at him with disgust, and his friends lowered their eyes. The judgment in the room pressed down heavier than any words I could have said. Mark's jaw clenched as he tried to salvage what little dignity he thought he had left. It was a mistake, he stammered, his voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to happen. Laura, please, can we talk about this privately? He glanced desperately at his mother, at his friends, searching for an ally, but all he found were stares heavy with disappointment. His hands shook as he reached for his glass, only to set it back down untouched. I straightened my shoulders, letting the weight of the silence hang over him. Privately? I repeated, my tone icy but calm. No, Mark. You chose to make a fool of me in public, so it's only fitting that the truth comes out in public too. I could see his sister's lips press into a thin line, his mother's eyes filling with tears. He had brought this humiliation on himself, and for once, the shame wasn't mine to carry. The woman's laugh from that video still rang in my ears, but it didn't weaken me. It steeled me. Around the table, no one moved, no one spoke. Mark's world had collapsed in a single night, and I had orchestrated every second of it. And yet, this wasn't the end. No, tonight was only the reveal. The real blow, the one he'd never recover from, was still waiting for him, and I could already taste the satisfaction of it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, but the air inside the house was cold, heavy with the wreckage of last night. Mark sat at the edge of the bed, his face pale, his eyes swollen from a night of restless half-sleep. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I was done listening to lies. My calm wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity, and clarity had teeth. I walked to the dresser, pulled open the top drawer, and slid out a crisp folder. Inside were the documents I'd been preparing for weeks, long before the footage confirmed what I already knew. His name was scrawled across every page, his signature proof of his arrogance. I placed the folder on the bed beside him, watching his confusion turn to dread as he opened it. His lips moved silently, eyes scanning the clauses he had forgotten. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady, almost gentle. The house, the accounts, the assets, all of it. You signed the prenup, Mark. Adultery has consequences, remember? His hands trembled as he fumbled with the papers, desperation spilling across his face. For once, I didn't feel sorry. For once, I felt free. And as he looked at me with panic in his eyes, I knew the final blow was already landing. Mark's voice cracked as he tried to regain control. Laura, please. We can fix this. I'll change, I swear. We don't have to do this. His words tumbled out in a rush, but they were hollow, the same promises he'd recycled 100 times before. I tilted my head, studying him like he was a stranger. Maybe he always had been. His pleas no longer reached me. They only confirmed how desperate he was now that the walls had closed in. I stood tall, arms crossed, the morning light catching the steel in my expression. No, Mark, you work this out yourself, in the backseat of a car. The words fell between us like a verdict, undeniable and final. He dropped his gaze, shame darkening his face, his shoulders collapsing under the weight of his own betrayal. He had built this prison with his own hands, and now he was trapped inside it. I handed him a small duffel bag I'd packed the night before. Enough clothes to get him through a week, no more. You'll find somewhere else to stay tonight, I said, my tone flat, practical. No screaming, no begging, just certainty. He looked up at me, eyes wide, as if searching for the woman who used to bend for him. But she was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. and there was no going back. He stood there in the doorway, clutching the bag like it was all he had left. His mouth opened and closed, words forming but never finding their way out. For once, Mark was silent, stripped of charm, stripped of excuses. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the woman's smug laugh, the way he looked at her, and the pity dissolved into something sharper. Triumph. "I never thought you'd actually do this," he whispered finally, his voice barely audible. His eyes searched mine, but I didn't flinch. "That's the problem, Mark," I replied, my tone calm, resolute. "You never thought I would. You never thought I could, but you underestimated me." The silence stretched between us, thick and final. He lingered 1 second longer before stepping outside, the door closing behind him with a sound that felt like freedom. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, inhaling deeply. The house felt different already, lighter, clearer, as if it had been holding its breath all this time and finally exhaled. I glanced around, seeing not the ruins of a marriage, but the beginning of something new. He was gone, and for the first time in years, the space around me belonged only to me. And while I knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple, I also knew one thing for certain: I was finally in control. Months slipped by, and with each one I felt myself shedding another layer of the woman I used to be. The house no longer echoed with tension. Instead, it hummed with the sound of my own music, the rhythm of my own footsteps. I redecorated room by room, painting over memories, replacing them with colors that felt like sunlight and freedom. I even dusted off my old paintbrushes, letting bright strokes cover canvases the way new joy was covering my life. Every morning felt like a chance to start fresh. I brewed coffee without the weight of waiting for his footsteps on the stairs. I laughed louder than I had in years, at little things: a good book, a silly show, the warmth of friends who reminded me who I really was. The silence no longer suffocated me, it cradled me, wrapped around me like proof that peace had finally returned. And every time I passed a mirror, I didn't see betrayal staring back anymore. I saw strength, resilience, and a woman who had been broken but had rebuilt herself stronger. The pain that once consumed me had become fuel, pushing me toward a version of myself I never knew existed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. One afternoon, I found myself back at the supermarket, a place that once felt so ordinary but now carried a sense of calm. I pushed my cart through the aisles, humming under my breath, when I froze. There he was, Mark. His shoulders hunched, his shirt wrinkled, his face carrying the weariness of a man who'd lost more than just a marriage. He looked smaller somehow, as if life had stripped him of the arrogance that once clung to him like armor. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. He stepped closer, desperation etched into every line of his face. "Laura," he whispered, his voice rough, almost pleading, "I made a mistake. Please, give me another chance." His words hung in the air, heavy, trembling, as though even he knew how hollow they sounded. I felt no anger this time, only a quiet certainty. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of confidence that comes when you've survived fire and walked out stronger. "No, Mark," I said gently, but firmly. "The only mistake I'd make is letting you back into my life." His lips parted as if to argue, but I was already turning away, my cart rolling forward. For once, I didn't look back. The chapter was closed, and I was the one who'd written the final line. I walked out of that store with my head high, the sun warm against my face, and a peace I hadn't felt in years filling my chest. For so long, I thought revenge would be the sweetest part, the exposure, the humiliation, the final blow. And yes, those moments had their sting. But the real victory was here, in the freedom I carried with every step, in the way my laughter now rang without restraint. At home, I placed fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, their fragrance spilling through the air. I brewed tea, opened my window, and let the breeze carry away the last fragments of him that had lingered. This was my life now, not defined by betrayal, but by the strength I discovered in myself. I had reclaimed more than my house, more than my peace. I had reclaimed me, and maybe that's the greatest revenge of all. Not the moment he fell, but the moment I rose. Because in the end, losing Mark wasn't my tragedy. It was my liberation. And as I sat there, paintbrush in hand, staring at the blank canvas before me, I realized with a smile that the rest of the story was mine to write.